Part 6. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 51. The next morning, the meeting room of the Special Operations Division of the Xuanhuan City Order Committee. 7 summoners from the Special Operations Division got up early in the morning and arrived here just after breakfast. Although a member of the Devil's Eye was successfully eliminated yesterday, this morning, the atmosphere in the conference room was not relaxed, but rather solemn. It was almost 4 o'clock in the morning when everyone returned to the station last night. Fortunately, the summoner has the secret to quickly enter deep sleep. After only sleeping for a few hours, everyone appeared in the conference room alive and well this morning. The person presiding over the meeting was Xuanhuan. Some information and details of yesterday's operation will be reviewed this morning and then reported. The DNA test results came out. There are a total of 272 limbs of the Devil's Eye sacrificed in the large pit underground of Qinjin Natural Resources Recycling Company. All of them are illegal immigrants from Guangzhou, Mexico who were deceived by the Devil's Eye. They were massacred in Xuanhuan City. The Devil's Eye has been completed for more than 4 months. Because they were immigrants and smuggled in, the Xuanhuan City Police did not receive a report of missing persons. We have never discovered that there is a case of such a large scale hidden there before. Devil's Eyes. Xuanhuan's tone was a little heavy. Because the country of Dian has a developed economy, a high living standard for the people, and good social welfare benefits, it is difficult for countries in Guangzhou, South America, to smuggle immigrants into Dian. Countless illegal immigrants risk all kinds of risks every year. Enter Dian through various channels. Preliminary estimates put the number of illegal immigrants living in Dian at more than 7 million, with many illegal immigrants still pouring in every year. It's just that Xuanhuan City was not the first choice city for these illegal immigrants to settle after the influx, so local government agencies and the police were somewhat lax in their investigations in this area. After these illegal immigrants entered Dian, even if they died, as long as they did not die in a public place, almost no one would know about it. The Devil's Eye took advantage of this and arranged such a terrifying Devil's Eye sacrifice ceremony in Xuanhuan City. The Evil Eye is the coordinate and torch of space invasion. During this period of time, 3 demon eyes were discovered in Xuanhuan City. Each of those demon eyes is more evil than the last, and each one has more people sacrificed. That is the most dangerous signal. Xuanhuan City may encounter a large-scale space invasion at any time. In other words, a space invasion far larger than before is imminent, and it is unknown when it will erupt like a volcano. That's why the atmosphere in the conference room was so tense. The provincial department has reported it to the headquarters. Because time is still short, the large-scale demon eye sacrifices hidden in other cities have not been discovered yet, but what is certain is that what we discovered last night is by no means the only one. In other cities, there must be evil eyes similar to this or larger than this one. The evil eyes have been planning for a long time and are able to bring so many illegal immigrants to Xuanhuan City. The problems exposed by this incident are not small. The headquarters has already organized elite forces to start investigating and arranging the foreign smuggler pipelines and border control that import illegal immigrants. Xiaopingan didn't say anything. This was to make up for the situation, but in terms of time, I'm afraid it was already a little too late. Judging from the large pit discovered last night, in the past few months, the number of victims of the sacrifice ceremony arranged by the Devil's Eye in Dian may exceed everyone's imagination. Therefore, the upcoming space invasion may exceed everyone's imagination. A small action has so many things involved behind it that people can't help but feel a little frightened. Cao Xinghua, who had been rarely speaking, spoke up. In this way, the situation in Xuanhuan City is just the tip of the iceberg in Dian Kingdom. Many cities in Dian Kingdom, including Xuanhuan City, may encounter the same situation as before in the future. An unprecedented space invasion. Yes, today's meeting is a mobilization meeting. The main purpose is to let everyone understand the severe situation we will face next and start preparing for war, Mo Yanshao nodded. At this time, Lao Long, Lao Chen and the others who are still on vacation and on missions should be back, Tu Polu asked. Mo Yanshao continued to introduce, they have received the order yesterday and will be back soon. In order to deal with the upcoming space invasion, the provincial department has decided to form a demon suppression guard again this morning. Everyone will have it next week. We may receive a summons from the provincial department, and some of us will be transferred to the demon suppression guard. No matter who is drawn, please be prepared. No matter in the demon suppression guard or in Xianghe City, we can create space for resistance. The invasion works. Senior, what is the composition of the devil suppressing guards? Xiaoping tilted his head and asked in a low voice, in a voice that only Li Yunzhou could hear. The demon suppressing guards are the summoners firefighting brigade organized by the provincial department. The number of demon suppressing guards at the provincial level may be a few hundred when it is small, but it can be thousands when it is large. In a more urgent situation, like this time, the provincial level, the ministry will recruit and mobilize some elite forces from order committees and society in various places to form a mobile force of summoners to flexibly respond to large-scale sudden space invasions. Li Yunzhou also turned his head and explained to Xiaopingan in a low voice. Hearing Xiaopingan, who had become a summoner, call him senior, Li Yunzhou felt a sense of elation, which was very refreshing. Xiaopingan nodded secretly. This is indeed what it should be. Under extraordinary circumstances, instead of letting the order committees in various places work on their own to face the sudden space invasion that will come suddenly, the provincial department might as well directly organize an elite force. On hand, it can be ensured that areas experiencing abnormal situations are supported at any time, which is a more efficient use of existing power. When he came back yesterday, although he had made some achievements, Xiaopingan was not in a relaxed mood. Since we have to face emergencies, will the provincial department distribute the elixirs to replenish divine power this month according to wartime standards? Fang Lingshan asked. In the past May, we have dealt with many accidents and emergencies. There are too many situations, and everyone's power is running low. I don't know either, but today is already the 13th, and in a few days it will be the day of salary payment, so everyone will know. Young Master Mo Yan spread his hands and said helplessly, I also know how much power everyone has consumed recently. It's a bit much, so starting tonight, we'll light the lights in order of duty and use the patrol method. 2 people will be dispatched every night, and the others can rest. The salary of the order committee and the elixirs for replenishing divine power are distributed on the full moon night of the 15th of each lunar calendar. This is the tradition of summoners. The full moon night of the 15th of this month is June 17th of the solar calendar. The day to receive salary and elixirs is already close. Xiaopingan has some expectations for this salary. He spends a lot these days, and he will be busy looking for a new house soon. There will be a big expense. With the salary of the order committee, even if he does not work for a full month, distributing it this time can also solve his urgent need. Everyone in the conference room breathed a sigh of relief when they heard that everyone would be on duty to light the lights starting tonight. Last night, the Special Operations Division eliminated the member of the Devil's Eye. The movement was not small. There is no possibility that there are members of the Devil's Eye lurking in Xianghe City. In any case, the Special Operations Division showed off the knife yesterday. The knife appeared. Blood, this will be a deterrent to various forces that may be hiding in Xianghe City. Xianghe City should be able to calm down for a few days, and the people in the Special Operations Department can also take a rest. At this moment, Xiaopingan's cell phone vibrated loudly. Everyone in the conference room stopped and looked at Xiaopingan. Because we don't know if there will be any emergencies, personnel from the Special Operations Division can bring their mobile phones in during such a meeting. The caller on the phone showed Officer Qian Lan, the female police officer from the Public Relations Department of Xianghe City Police Station. Xiaopingan did not answer the call, but hung up. Is something wrong? Mo Yanshao asked. It's okay, it's just a personal matter. I'll call you later. Xiaopingan put away his phone. Hey, it's a female police officer calling. Li Yunzhou's sharp eyes saw the caller on Xiaopingan's cell phone. Is this your girlfriend? Seeing An Qing, Fang Lingshan, Tupolu, and even Mo Yanshao and others staring at his face, Xiaopingan was helpless. He didn't expect the summoner to be so gossipy. Xiaopingan was a little embarrassed. Ahem, hey, it's not my girlfriend, it was a dispute over renting a house before. I reported the case, and this is the female police officer who handled the case. Hearing that Xiaopingan mentioned renting a house again, everyone looked at each other and found it interesting. It was so interesting that a dignified summoner, a summoner of the National Order Committee, would encounter trouble when renting a house. Cao Xinghua suddenly said, I still have a villa in Xianghe City. I rarely go there myself. If you don't have a place to stay for the time being, you can live with me. The rent will not be charged. You just need to clean it for me. I feel more comfortable living here. Thank you, no need. I have a younger sister. That's too disturbing. It's a small matter. I'll take care of it, so I won't bother you all, Xiaopingan politely refused. Xiaopingan's performance yesterday has made everyone in the Special Operations Department recognize him and completely regard Xiaopingan as a member of the Special Operations Department. Even Cao Xinghua's attitude towards him has become much better. Ahem, let's continue talking about what happened yesterday. Mo Yanshao brought everyone back to the topic of the meeting. Through review, we found that there was an oversight in last night's action. It was this oversight that caused last night's operation almost failed at the beginning and encountered major risks. I raised it here. I hope everyone will learn from it and won't make the same mistake next time we encounter it. The flaw in last night's action was caused by a dog. No one had thought before that the member of Devil's Eye would actually regard a dog as his host body. The main body of brain-eating worms is human beings, and dogs as the hosts of brain-eating worms are inherently defective, which will prevent the main body of brain-eating worms from fully controlling the dog's actions. However, there will also be a benefit, that is once the dog as the host encounters an accident, the subject can also quickly sense it. Yesterday, Xiaopingan and several people suddenly entered the factory. As soon as Li Yunzhou took out his silent tranquilizer pistol and put down the two dogs, the members of the Devil's Eye immediately sensed that this was the problem. After reviewing yesterday's actions, the meeting ended, and after everyone walked out of the conference room, Xiaopingan took out his cell phone again and dialed Officer Qian Ian's number. Hello, Officer Qian, it's not convenient for me to answer the phone just now. What's the matter? Xiaopingan asked as soon as the call was connected. The landlord's family has found a lawyer. The lawyer wants to find an opportunity to talk to you, Mr. Xia, to see if he can get your understanding, Mr. Xia. I think Mr. Xia can also communicate with the other party's lawyer about this matter first. The euphemistic hint in Officer Qian Ian's tone was very clear. Mr. Xia, whenever is convenient for you, I will bring the lawyer to meet you and we can have a good chat. Xiaopingan's spirit perked up slightly, and a smile appeared on his lips. Knowing that the person delivering the money was coming, he said directly, then at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we will still be in the tea room of Guangzhou Hotel. Okay, then I'll see you in the afternoon. As long as there are no tasks, the work arrangements of the Special Operations Division are very free. As long as they don't run out of Xianghe City, Xiaopingan can go out to do some personal things in the afternoon and resolve the dispute over the previous house. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 52. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Xiaopingan appeared in the tea hall of Guangzhou Hotel on time. As soon as he entered the tea room, Xiaopingan saw Officer Qian Lan and a middle-aged man wearing a suit and glasses sitting in a corner of the tea room chatting about something. Xiaopingan walked towards the two of them. Officer Qianlan spotted Xiaopingan and stood up, and then the middle-aged man in a suit and glasses also stood up. Today, Qianlan is wearing a light blue women's suit and high heels, with long hair hanging over her shoulders, like a beautiful white-collar beauty. "Hello, Mr. Xia," Officer Qianlan smiled and shook hands with Xiaopingan, and then introduced the middle-aged man wearing glasses to Xiaopingan. "This is Lawyer Mu, and this is Mr. Xia." "Hello, Mr. Xia." "Hello." The lawyer seemed very enthusiastic and quickly shook hands with Xiaopingan. "You two, let's talk. I'm here today to introduce you. If you have any questions, please call me." Seeing Xiaopingan's arrival, Officer Qianlan took her blue bag and left with a smile. After Qianlan left, Xiaopingan and Lawyer Mu were the only ones left in this tea house. Lawyer Mu stood up and politely poured a cup of tea for Xiaopingan. While pouring the tea, he said complimentarily, "Mr. Xia is really young and promising. He joined Optics Valley News Agency at such a young age. He will definitely have a bright future in the future." "Lawyer Mu, you're welcome. I'm in a hurry today. Can we get to the topic quickly?" Xiaopingan said directly. Refreshing, Lawyer Mu sat down. "My client is deeply sorry for the harm and inconvenience caused to Mr. Xia and Mr. Xia's sister. The two of them have regretted their original impulse in the detention center these days. When Mr. Xia and I meet this time, on the one hand, I want to apologize to Mr. Xia on behalf of my client, and on the other hand, I also want to discuss with Mr. Xia how to resolve this matter as soon as possible." "What does Lawyer Mu's settlement mean?" Xiaopingan asked with a smile. "Well, my client has indeed never seen Mr. Pressure. The Xianghe City Police Department is also under pressure." Lawyer Mu spoke to Xiaopingan carefully, and the slightly greasy and sly eyes of the adult behind the eyes stared unblinkingly at Xiaopingan's face. "I'm a victim, and there's nothing I can do about it," Xiaopingan said with a smile and spread his hands. "I know that Mr. Xia is the victim. When my client turned over Mr. Xia's house before, he made it a little messy, but he did not see any guns. The money taken was not 500,000 yuan, but 30,000 yuan. Yeah, I wonder, is there some misunderstanding? Maybe the gun is still in the house, and the other money that Mr. Xia lost may be somewhere else in the house. Mr. Xia might as well take some time to go back and look for it again. Look for it, maybe you can find it." As Lawyer Mu spoke, he had already taken out a bank card from his body and pushed it from the table to Xiaopingan. "Lawyer Mu, what do you mean? There are 500,000 yuan in this card. It is an anonymous bank card. The password is the first 6 digits of the card number. This is a small amount of financial compensation and apology to Mr. Xia that my client's family has put together. Our client knows these things about Mr. Xia. I can't go back home, and staying in a hotel outside is expensive and inconvenient. That day at Mr. Xia's house, my client broke and messed up some things in the house. This is a small amount of compensation. I hope Mr. Xia can accept it." Xiaopingan smiled, glanced at Lawyer Mu, and took the bank card unceremoniously. "Okay, I received this apology. I will find time to move out of that house in the next few days. When I move, I will let's look again and see if the gun and money I reported missing before are somewhere at home." "Thank you so much," Lawyer Mu said happily, sighing secretly in his heart. Communicating with smart people will save his worries, and he can earn his legal fees steadily. As for his client, he is interested in understanding the case. For Lawyer Mu, speaking from the bottom of his heart, he deserves it. It is common sense in the law that buying and selling does not break the lease. Pretending that you are the new landlord, breaking the door, twisting the lock, and entering the tenant's home to take things is tantamount to theft. You are also acting mischievously. This time you kicked the iron plate and provoked the people you shouldn't mess with. I really can't blame anyone for getting myself involved. Then again, if it weren't for these idiots, I wouldn't be able to make money from my job. Lawyer Mu studied law. Let me ask, if my gun and part of the missing money are found, what will the court's final verdict be? Lawyer Mu pushed up his glasses and said, well, it is clear that my two clients broke into a private house and took away Mr. Xia's belongings and threatened Mr. Xia's life and safety. Legally speaking, this is a home invasion. If they can obtain Mr. Xia's forgiveness and recover the lost firearms and other deposits in time, the court may take appropriate measures when making the judgment. Taking into account their remorse and compensation to Mr. for cases involving theft of about 30,000 yuan and ordinary troubles caused by asking for money, the sentencing standard should be about 2 years. Okay, I have no problem. Xia Pinggan stood up and was ready to leave. I will take time to go home and look for it in the next few days. If I find the things I lost before, I will call Qianlan directly. Contact the police. This is my business card. If Mr. Xia encounters any legal problems in the future, you can come to me. Lawyer Mu bowed slightly and handed over a business card with both hands. Xia Pinggan took it, looked at it, put away the business card, and then he shook hands with Lawyer Mu and said goodbye. 500,000 in hand. When he walked out of the hotel door, Xia Pinggan secretly sighed in his heart. He was right when he said that there are no poor summoners. When faced with this kind of thing where he would rather break his head and bleed, he would stuff money into his pocket. If he didn't accept it, he would be sorry to the couple. This social beating should make that couple learn to be more honest in the future. Xia Pinggan walked out of the hotel and took out his mobile phone and sent a message directly to Xianing, go home and make fragrant pot soup on Friday. A few seconds later, Xianing replied, yeah. Smiley face. Xia Pinggan walked to a nearby bus stop, waited for a bus, and finally left on the bus. On the street outside the hotel, under a big tree, Officer Qianlan was sitting in a black SUV. At the driving seat was Officer Lu Rui, the deputy captain of the Criminal Investigation Brigade of the Xianghe City Police Department. Watching Xia Pinggan walk to the bus stop, get on a bus and leave, Lu Rui looked at Qianlan. Isn't the Xia University reporter too frugal? He actually came by bus. He just took the bus 500,000 yuan. Does Optics Valley News Agency have such a poor resident reporter? Perhaps Xia University reporter just likes it. Officer Qianlan also looked at the leaving bus with interest. Without her saying anything, Officer Lu Rui had already driven the car and quietly followed the bus Xia Pinggan was riding. Car. 40 minutes later, I watched Xia Pinggan change buses twice, and finally got off the bus at the parking stop outside the Xianghe City National Order Committee. He walked towards the gate of the Xianghe City State Order Committee, sat in the car and turned the car away. Qianlan and Lu Rui, who stopped far away on the roadside and followed Xia Pinggan here with their cameras, looked at each other and took a breath. Xia Pinggan walked to the gate of the National Order Committee, which opened automatically. Before entering, Xia Pinggan turned around and waved to Qianlan and Lu Rui who were sitting in the car a few hundred meters away. He found us. Lu Rui's face changed slightly. Delete all the photos taken today on the camera. Qianlan looked at the camera in his hand, frowned slightly with his beautiful eyebrows, and smiled bitterly. The people above never want to cause some trouble. Inexplicable trouble. We have to take the photos back, and that's our own trouble. As Lu Rui spoke, he took out the memory card from the camera, broke it into pieces, and threw it out of the car window onto the road outside. He couldn't help but cursed in a low voice, those two idiots don't know what they have done. Who dares to act recklessly if they think they are landlords? I have already shown mercy. I just want to teach them a lesson, otherwise if I kill them on the spot, their death will be in vain. When Xia Pinggan returned to the headquarters, he found that the Special Operations Division's evening duty schedule had been arranged. Next Monday, it would be Xia Pinggan's turn to light up the lights for the first time. But the good news is that he and Anqing were assigned to a group. It shouldn't be an uncomfortable task to light a lamp and spend a long dark night with a beauty like An Cheng. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 53. Phew, finally home. At around 5 o'clock on Friday evening, two brothers and sisters, Xiaoping'an and Xiaoning, each carrying two suitcases in their hands, walked up from downstairs and stood at the door of the rented house again. The two of them had just gone to the supermarket together, where they bought 4 durable suitcases. Then they took 2 cars back to the community. One car could not fit 4 suitcases. The suitcase is not heavy, but it is bulky and difficult to carry. Because he was preparing to move and there were not enough suitcases at home, Xiaoping'an made an appointment with Xiaoning to buy some this afternoon. Xiaoping'an took the 2 largest ones by himself, and Xiaoning took the 2 slightly smaller ones. The 2 brothers and sisters each took 2 suitcases from the door of the community and climbed to the top of the building. Xiaoping'an was fine, but Xiaoning was already shaking and sore. His arms and eyebrows were knitted together. "Brother, I'm so sorry. If we want to move, we really need to buy a car. Why don't we first transfer some money from your housing fund? Like just now, it's hard to take a taxi with these suitcases. Now, we have to move everything to death, and hiring someone to move is expensive and not worth it. Well, let's go check out the car over the weekend," Xiaoping'an said, taking out the key and opening the door. "Really?" Xiaoning's eyes widened suddenly, looking very excited. "Well, really," Xiaoping'an nodded. "You need a car to move, and you also need a car to go to the headquarters. More importantly, in the face of a larger-scale space invasion that you don't know when it will come, if some extreme circumstances occur, you will have a car to take Xiaoning away. It will also be more convenient." When Xiaoping'an got the 500,000 yuan yesterday, he was already thinking about buying a car. 2 siblings entered the house. The house was a bit messy, and many things had been turned over. It was even messy than the last time the 2 brothers and sisters came back. But fortunately, although things are a little messy, there is nothing damaged. Just tidy them up. You pack your things, and I'll go to the kitchen to make dinner first, Xiaoping'an said to Xiaoning after putting down the suitcase. Okay, Xiaoning agreed. The 2 brothers and sisters each became busy. Although the things in the house were a bit messy, the thought of eating the fragrant pot soup cooked by Xiaoping'an tomorrow made Xiaoning's glutton come out again, and she started to pack up the things in the house. Xiaoping'an, on the other hand, was busy in the kitchen. Take out things like sea cucumbers, mushrooms, abalone, shark fins, chicken, shrimps and vegetables, and start getting busy in the kitchen. These sat in the refrigerator for a week, intact and still edible. First, take out the sea cucumber and abalone and soak them in water for tomorrow. The other things can be cooked for a meal today. Xiaoping'an was tinkering in the kitchen like a chef. In less than an hour, a pot of fragrant rice, a plate of tomato and shrimp meat, a plate of braised diced chicken, a plate of soy cucumber, and a bowl of cabbage and tofu soup were ready. Xiaoning also tidied up the house again. The 2 brothers and sisters sat at the dining table together, smiled at each other, and then ate. After dinner, Xiaoning pushed Xiaoping'an to the sofa, made Xiaoping'an a cup of tea, and turned on the TV. "Thank you for the delicious dinner, brother. Thank you for your hard work. Now please take a rest and have a drink tea, leave the rest to your capable sister." Xiaoning was in the kitchen, and the news from Xianghe City was playing on the TV. Within a few minutes, Xiaoping'an saw the news on the news that Gao Qingshan was found and shot to death by the police. The place where Gao Qingshan was shot was the same factory full of waste products where the operation took place that night. After the order committee was done with the place was handed over to the police. The terrifying demon eye has been cleaned up and does not appear on the TV screen. In addition to murder, Gao Qingshan, who was shot to death, was also charged with child trafficking and illegally harboring smugglers. Seeing such news, Xiaoping's eyes narrowed slightly. The Order Committee does not want to cause panic among the public, which is understandable, because history has proven countless times that the consequences of fear of space invasion may exceed the space invasion itself. But for Xianghe City, large-scale space invasion is already imminent. Glancing at Xiaoning, who was humming and washing dishes in the kitchen, Xiaoping'an felt that he had to make preparations early. Xiaoning quickly collected and washed the dishes, then came out of the kitchen, sat cross-legged on the sofa, and began to discuss moving with Xiaoping'an. Xiaoning has looked at a lot of houses online this week and done a lot of homework. When talking about communities and houses, she is like a trained agent. The location, orientation, environment, greening, property fees, building age, occupancy groups of the community. Xiaoning spoke eloquently. Watching Xiaoning introduce and analyze the communities to herself, Xiaoping'an remained silent, feeling a little inexplicable guilt in his heart. He had no relatives in his previous life, and in this life, he only had one sister. In the past, I always wanted to hide my abilities, worried about too many things, and paid less attention to Xiaoning. This Qingshan Garden community is one of the several alternative communities I chose. This community is less than 2 kilometers away from our school. It meets your requirements, brother. There is a commercial center 500 meters around the community. The properties of the community, the reviews are good. The community was built less than 7 years ago. The houses are still relatively new and there are many young people living here. However, the price is a little more expensive than the one we live in now. There are now more than 40 suites in this community. The source is listed for rent, and the layout of the apartments is pretty good. Xiaoning took out her mobile phone and opened the web page on her mobile phone while introducing Xiaoping'an to the place she was interested in. While talking, Xiaoning didn't notice that Xiaoping'an looked at her slightly apologetically. "Ningning, we won't rent a house this time. Let's move to a hotel for a while," Xiaoping'an suddenly said. "Don't you like Guangzhou Hotel? Let's go and stay at Guangzhou Hotel." Ah! Xiaoning was stunned for a moment. "Brother, do you regard Guangzhou Hotel as a small hotel? Staying there for one day is more expensive than renting a house for us for a month. I didn't tell you before, but the landlord's lawyer found me yesterday and gave me 500,000 yuan in compensation." Xiaoping'an took out the bank card and put it on the table. "With this 500,000 yuan, I can probably stay at Guangzhou Hotel. Let's go for 3 or 4 months. You'll be on summer vacation soon. I'm often away from home during the summer vacation, so it's more convenient for you to stay at the Guangzhou Hotel." "Brother, did you really lose 500,000 yuan?" Xiaoping'an nodded. "There are still more than 20,000, and the police have to return it." Xiaoning was completely stunned. She listened when Xiaoping'an called to report the crime last time. She thought the matter would turn into a quarrel in the end, but she didn't expect that Xiaoping'an really got 500,000 yuan in compensation. More than 500,000 yuan is a large amount for Xiaoning, and at the same time, this amount of money is also unbelievable for Xiaoning. Xiaoning suddenly took the 500,000 card and jumped up on the sofa. She was so excited that she yelled, 500,000, 500,000, great, great. Xiaoning jumped for a while. When she was tired, she stopped and hugged Xiaoping'an's neck. "Brother, with these 500,000 yuan, plus the 120,000 yuan housing fund we saved before, we can buy a house. I have a house, or I can borrow a little more money to buy a bigger house. The bigger house can be used as your wedding room, brother. I've said it first, I just want one room. Brother, you won't do it? Get rid of your lovely and capable sister. By the way, Brother, what kind of house do you want to buy? The country of Dian is vast and sparsely populated, and the development of real estate is not so deformed. All houses are delivered with fine decoration, and there are no such things as public stalls. The housing prices are not too far away from ordinary people. In small, third and fourth tier cities like Xianghe City, in the city, a villa with 2 to 3 million yuan in the suburbs is already very good. Go to Guangzhou Hotel to stay for a few months first, and we'll talk about the house later, Xiaopinggan said. Xiaoning was startled and touched Xiaopinggan's forehead. Brother, you don't have a fever, right? Why do you want to live in such an expensive place when you're so good? I felt so distressed after staying there for 2 nights last time. I can't even make up for a single circle of friends. Because Guangzhou Hotel has the best underground shelter and the strictest security measures in the entire Xianghe city. When I am not with you, it is safest for you to stay in Guangzhou Hotel. Underground shelter. Xiaoning murmured to himself, as if he thought of something. His face changed slightly. Brother, it can't be. It's good that you know, brother, I don't have enough money to own the Guangzhou Hotel, but in critical times, hundreds of thousands are nothing, and I can still distinguish the importance of this. Xiaopinggan touched it, touching Xiaoning's head. Just pretend that the previous landlord asked us to stay in the hotel to apologize. It's decided. We will buy a car tomorrow and then move to the hotel on Sunday night. Okay, let's go to the room to pack our things. Xiaopinggan showed his brother's dignity and made the decision directly. Xiaoning nodded, did not argue any more, and returned to his room to start collecting his things. Xiaopinggan smiled, took out his mobile phone and made a call to Officer Qian Lan. The phone rang twice and then connected. Hello, Mr. Xia. Officer Qian's voice on the phone became gentler and more polite. Officer Qian, well, I went back to the rental house to search again today. The house was too messy and some things were not found. I searched carefully today and found that the gun and bullets I lost were still there. It was not lost, it was in the rental house, and most of the money was found. After counting, only more than 20,000 yuan was lost, and there were a few paintings. Well, my principle in life is to never falsely accuse a good person. We can't let anyone do it for a little money. Suffer the unjust injustice and seek truth from facts. Okay, that's it. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm at home on Sunday at noon. After peeling off a layer of skin from that trash couple, that's pretty much it. A speechless night. Early the next morning, after having some breakfast at home, Xiaopinggan took Xiaoning to buy a car. The two went straight to the largest second-hand car trading market in Xianghe City. For experienced drivers and mechanics like Xiaopinggan, the condition of some high-quality second-hand cars is definitely more reliable than new cars. The key is that the price of second-hand cars is much cheaper than new cars, so he plans to buy a car in better condition. Used pickup truck. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 54. At noon on Sunday, Qian Lan carried a box and came alone to the unit building where Xiaopinggan and Xiaoning lived. Just entering the lobby downstairs, she saw a naughty child rolling on the floor in the lobby, crying, and playing tricks with an ant. Grandma, I want to eat this, it tastes so good, here we go again, Grandma, I want to eat. The ant was complaining to the security guard in the mailroom in the lobby with a helpless look on her face. Really, who is making the soup again on weekends? It brings out the greedy little grandchildren every time, and they are going to cause trouble, eh? The security guard in the mailroom stuck his head out of the window, sniffed, and swallowed. It feels like someone is cooking it upstairs. How come there is such a fragrant soup? I come here every few weeks. It's really fatal. Yeah, this soup is so fragrant. I don't know whose family is making it. The old lady looked at her grandson with distress. Last time I knocked on the door from door to door and asked for some soup for my grandson, but there was no one. "Open the door for me." Xuanhuan also smelled the fragrance. It was a very special fragrance that made people feel appetizing. The fragrance was wafting in the unit building. It seemed to be coming down the stairs or coming from outside. Floated in. "Girl, who are you looking for?" The security guard in the mailroom looked up and saw a beautiful girl in a long skirt walking to the lobby carrying a box. "Out of duty?" he asked. "I am Xiaopinggan's friend and came to see him." Xuanhuan replied. "Oh, Xiaopinggan, we live on the top floor, just go up the stairs," the security guard in the mailroom said. "Okay, thank you." Xuanhuan naturally knew which room Xiaopinggan lived in. Xuanhuan started to go upstairs along the stairs. When she reached the stairs, she heard the security guard and the old woman behind her muttering quietly. Finally, a girl came to see that young man Xiaopinggan. "I thought Xiaopinggan was going to be a bachelor for the rest of his life. This girl is quite pretty. Why would she fall in love with Xiaopinggan? He is a car repairman who is honest, responsible, and has no money." The old aunt also muttered. Listening to the discussion between the uncle and the aunt downstairs, Xuanhuan looked strange. "Are you actually the first girl to come here to find Xiaopinggan? Xiaopinggan does his job honestly and has no money. Let's not talk about whether the previous sentence is true or false, but the latter sentence will definitely disagree with the landlord and his wife who lost 500,000 yuan and are still in jail. The further you go up, the stronger the fragrance that echoes in the unit building becomes. The fragrance is mellow, fragrant, and fresh. It seems to smell like seafood. If you smell it carefully, you can feel the smell of chicken soup. In short, it is difficult to describe." Although Xuanhuan was not a foodie, the scent still made her mouth secrete saliva like crazy, and she felt a little hungry. No wonder that naughty kid is rolling downstairs. But soon, Xuanhuan arrived outside the house where Xiaopinggan lived. She first looked at the house number and found it was correct, and then pressed the doorbell. Ding dong, ding dong. The doorbell only rang twice, and after a few seconds, the security door opened. Xuanhuan saw a pretty girl aged 10.5 peeking out her head from behind the door, and looked outside carefully. "Ah, who are you looking for?" Xuanhuan smiled. "You are Xianing, I am Xuanhuan. I made an appointment with your brother to come over at noon today to deliver your lost paintings, money, and belongings." "Ah, you are Sister Qian. My brother said you are beautiful and capable. Please come in." Xianing's eyes lit up when she saw Xuanhuan. She quickly opened the door and invited Xuanhuan in. As soon as Xuanhuan came in, Xianing quickly closed the door, as if she was afraid that the air in the room would escape. "The smell in this house?" As soon as she walked into the room, Qian's nose moved. She found that the fragrance was stronger in this room. Could it be that the fragrance that can be smelled in the whole building comes from this house? "Brother, Sister Qian is here." Xianing called towards the kitchen. Then a voice came from the kitchen. "Okay, please ask Officer Qian to sit down for a moment. The soup is ready. I'll bring it out and you can eat." That irresistible aroma comes from the kitchen. "Sister Qian, you came just in time to have dinner with us and try my brother's soup making skills." Xianing, who brought Xuanhuan to the dining room, winked at Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan originally wanted to refuse, saying that he had already had lunch, but when the words came to his lips, he somehow turned into, "Is that smell the soup made by my brother?" "Not bad, it's fragrant enough," Xianing said proudly. "That's my brother's specialty. He is the only one in the world who can make such a delicious soup." "Then it looks like I'm in luck," Xuanhuan smiled. As he spoke, Xuanhuan saw Xiaopinggan, wearing an apron, walking out of the kitchen carrying a large bowl of fragrant soup pot. It's absolutely true that the fragrance emanates from the soup pot in Xiaopinggan's hand. "Mr. Xia, I'm sorry, I didn't expect you were eating." Xuanhuan stood up and said to Xiaopinggan. The Xiaopingan in front of him was like a cute and warm boy next door, which even made Qianlan feel a little strange. Wearing an apron and looking smoky, is Xiaopingan really the same person who quietly let himself and Lu Rui follow him that day until he finally walked into the gate of the order committee and turned around to wave to himself and Lu Rui? Ha ha ha, I bothered Officer Qian to make another trip for my business. This place is simple and there is nothing to entertain, so please invite Officer Qian to have a simple meal with us. Xiaopingan smiled, you're welcome, please sit down, I'll go to the kitchen and bring 2 more dishes. Ah, let me help you. In a short while, Xiaopingan, Xiaoning and Qianlan were sitting around the table. There were 3 dishes and 1 soup on the table. The aroma of the soup made people drool. Xiaoning opened a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling wine and poured 3 glasses. This cup is to celebrate that my brother finally bought a second-hand pickup truck. Our family finally has a car. We don't have to take the bus when we go out to set up stalls in the future. I also want to thank Sister Qian for giving back the money we lost from my painting. Here we go, today is a double happiness. After listening to Xiaoning's words, Xiaopingan and Qianlan looked at each other and laughed at the same time. The 3 of them had a drink, and Xiaoning took Qianyan's bowl and added 2 spoons of soup to Qianyan's bowl. There were sea cucumbers and abalone in the soup. Sister Qian, this is my brother's special skill, the Xia family's secret fragrant soup, you can try it? Whether it was for taste buds or curiosity, Qianlan couldn't help it. Seeing the fragrant soup in the bowl, Qianlan picked up the spoon and took a small sip. The look on Qianyan's face, the expression becomes wonderful. This soup is really delicious. With just 1 sip, Qianlan felt that the taste buds in his mouth were suddenly opened, and he couldn't help but want to take a second sip. Xiaoning raised her eyebrows at Xiaopingan. The expression on her face, in Xiaopingan's eyes, only said one thing, brother, this sister is not bad. After the meal, Xiaopingan sent Qianlan out of the community. Seeing that Qianlan wanted to say something several times but hesitated, Xiaopingan smiled and stretched out his hand, Officer Qian, please formally meet me, Xiaopingan, a screw of the National Order Committee of Xianghe City. Qianlan was stunned for a moment, then seemed relieved. He smiled and shook hands with Xiaopingan. Qianlan, first-level superintendent of Xianghe City Police Department, by the way, can I ask you a personal question? What is the problem? Are you a summoner? If I want to tell you, I have to shut up. Qianyan's heart tightened, and when she saw the smile on Xiaopingan's face, she realized that Xiaopingan was joking with her. In the evening, after finishing the last of the fragrant pot soup cooked at home, Xiaopingan took Xiaoning and officially started moving. It was said to be a move, but it was actually simple. The 2 of them moved the 6 suitcases they had packed into Xiaopingan's newly bought second-hand pickup truck. Then Xiaopingan drove his newly bought second-hand pickup truck, pulling Sally and Xiaoning along. When we arrived at Guangzhou Hotel, we booked a suite and settled down temporarily. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 55. Monday, June 17, 2019, is the 15th day of the 5th lunar month. Tonight is the day of the full moon, and it is also the favorite and most anticipated day for summoners every month. On this night every month, the secret altar where the summoners gather is like an empty wine bottle, and half of its divine power will automatically be restored. Even if his divine power is completely exhausted and he does nothing, he only needs to wait 2 months for his divine power to recover. For the summoners of the National Order Committee, today is still the time to pay their monthly salaries and benefits. In the headquarters building of the National Order Committee in Xianghe City, there has not been such a relaxed atmosphere for a long time. Early in the morning, there were 3 new faces in Mo Yanxiao's office. There are 2 men and 1 woman. One of the 2 men is a little older, looks to be in his 50s, his hair is a bit gray, but he has an elegant temperament and wears gold-rimmed glasses. He is a charming middle-aged uncle, and the other man is 3 years old. He is in his teens, sharp and cold, with a hideous tattoo on his neck. As for that woman, she has voluptuous fiery red hair, an angel's face, a devil's figure, and a fiery temperament. She is wearing a long dress customized by top Italian women's clothing. None of the 3 men in the room smoked, but the red-haired woman was sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed, holding a women's cigarette in her hand. Her temperament was like a domineering female president, a bit domineering. Director, I heard that our Special Operations Department has a new member, who has perfect fusion of the Divine Fire Realm Pearl, and has mastered the Requiem banner. The elegant middle-aged uncle touched Mo Yanshao with some emotion while talking. My own silver hair, young people today are amazing, I feel a little old. You are already old, the red-haired lady blew out the smoke ring in her mouth, glanced at the elegant man, and spoke without mercy, that little guy doesn't have a girlfriend yet, so just leave it to me. Looking at the 3 colleagues who returned to the Special Operations Division in front of him, Mo Yan could only rub his nose helplessly and said to the woman, Nana, didn't you mean to take advantage of this holiday to find a man to talk to, a vigorous love? Why, you haven't found your true love yet. All the men in this world are blind. I've been walking around alone for a month, but no decent man dared to come over and strike up a conversation. Every one of those men looked like a shrimp or a quail when they saw me. I'm not even interested. The woman said disdainfully. Men are not blind, they just instinctively know how to avoid danger and don't want to fall into the tiger's mouth. Another silent man glanced at the red-haired woman and said coldly. Long Giwan, what do you mean? You said I am unfeminine. The woman stared at the man dissatisfied. The man looked at the ceiling and didn't answer. Okay, stop arguing. When the 3 of you come back, we have all the people from the Special Operations Division, Mo Yanshao said, now that you know the situation in Xianghe City, please prepare yourself. We will officially arrive today. Post. The 3 people stood up and were about to leave Mo Yanshao's office, but just as they were leaving, the 3 people seemed to feel something and looked towards the entrance of the order committee downstairs. The location of Mr. Mo Yan's office is right opposite the main entrance. From here, you can clearly see the situation below the building. The door of the order committee was opened just now. A black pickup truck, which was not too old and had some paint peeling off, drove in through the door and parked in the open-air parking space under the building. Then a young man stepped out of the car. He got off, slammed the car door, and walked towards the building. The young man who got off the car seemed to feel the gaze from this office, and raised his head and glanced here. This is our new colleague, he has a lot of personality. The elegant old man glanced at Mo Yanshao, and then looked at the pickup truck that was already horrible in his mind. It's just that our Xianghe, when did the summoners of the city order committee become so poor? Looking at the pickup truck that Xia Pingan drove, Mo Yan was speechless. Without asking, he knew that it must be a second-hand pickup truck that Xia Pingan bought, because Xia Pingan didn't have a car before, but after a weekend, he came here. Xia Pingan, who was at work, drove up in an old pickup truck. No need to ask, he must have bought it on the weekend. Xia Pingan had previously inquired about applying for a vehicle pass. He's quite handsome, he's my type. A smile appeared on the red-haired woman's lips, and her eyes flashed. Does his family run a farm? Long Giwan also asked Mo Yanshao. Ahem, cough, cough, his family doesn't run a farm. He used to be a car mechanic who awakened the ability of remote viewing. You can get to know each other during lunch, young Master Mo Yan could only reply. The 3 of them nodded and left Mo Yanshao's office. Below the building, Xia Pingan was walking quickly into the building. Mo Yanshao had contacted him before and asked him to go to Mo Yanshao's office before arriving at the headquarters. Xia Pingan was still a little excited today, because today was the day to receive his salary, and it was time to witness the benefits of the order committee. 2 elevators passed by each other on the 9th floor, and Xiaopinggan did not see the 3 people who were still in young Master Mo Yan's office before. When I came to the door of young Master Mo Yan's office, I knocked on the door, and young Master Mo Yan's voice came from inside, "Come in." Xiaopinggan walked in. "Director, look for me." "Well, sit down." Xiaopinggan sat on the chair opposite Mo Yanshao. "Did you buy a new car over the weekend?" Mo Yanshao asked. "Yes," Xiaopinggan nodded. "Well, today is the day when wages are paid. You can go to the finance room to get your bank card later. In fact, you can buy a better car. The summoners in the order committee are treated well. There's no need to save on expenses. What young Master Mo Yan wants to say is that the car is a trivial matter and not worth much money. But if Xiaopinggan drives that pickup truck and is seen by the provincial department or other summoners, they will definitely think that young Master Mo Yan is treating his team members harshly. Damn it, did the summoner with the Requiem banner have such a miserable life following Mo Yan? If this rumor spreads, it will not be a good thing for Mo Yanshao. He will take the blame for no reason, so I have to mention it. Xiaopinggan didn't seem to understand for a moment. Although that Chinese pickup truck is second-hand, it is actually very good, reliable, and durable. The previous owner bought it less than half a year ago and drove less than 5,000 kilometers because the car was too. I was scratched several times while driving my car. Once when I parked, I occupied the parking space next to me. Someone also poured sulfuric acid on the car, which peeled off a lot of paint. Yesterday I went to the second-hand car market and saw the owner of the car driving up to sell it. I bought it directly, and I can just find time to touch up the sheet metal. Mo Yan was speechless, and realized that Xiaopinggan didn't understand. In the end, he could only say, "Old Joe likes to tinker with these things. I'll let him help you deal with it. That car has lost a lot of paint, and it does look a bit miserable. If you drive out in a car like that, others will think I'm abusing you." Xiaopinggan smiled and understood. "Okay, thank you, Director. I called you here today to give you this." Mo Yanshao took out a palm-sized metal box from the drawer of his desk and handed it over. The box was a metal box issued by the Committee of Order. When Xiaopinggan saw the 4 words on the box, he was a little surprised. He raised his head and glanced at young Master Mo Yan. "Slave Soldier Realm Pearl." "Yes, this is the Slave Soldier World Bead. In the last operation to kill the members of the Devil's Eye, you performed well. I reported it to the provincial department, and the provincial department issued the Slave Soldier World Bead to my subordinates in advance. As long as it is integrated with the Slave Soldier Realm Pearl, you have a second attack method besides Fireball, so you can deal with more situations." In addition to his good performance in the last operation, the biggest reason Xiaopinggan is probably related to the upcoming space invasion. The Slave Soldier World Pearl was issued in advance, and when the space invasion broke out, he would have stronger power. Unexpectedly, the space invasion also gave me the opportunity to fuse the Slave Soldier World Pearl in advance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 56. The success rate of the Slave World Bead is very high. Most summoners can successfully fuse this world bead, and it doesn't take long. You should find time to fuse it this morning. Okay, I'll go back and fuse in a while. Xiaopinggan actually wanted to open the box now to see what the so-called Slave Soldier World Bead was, but he suppressed this idea. Mo Yanshao nodded and continued to explain to Xiaopinggan, "Today is the 15th of the lunar calendar, which is a good day for summoners. Wait until night, before the moon rises. Remember to consume at least half of your divine power and convert it into the spells are stored in the secret mandala, otherwise they will be wasted, and there is nothing else to do. By the way, a few colleagues from the Special Operations Division are back. You haven't seen them before. Remember to go to the restaurant at noon and get to know them. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll go out first. When Xiaopingyan walked to the door, Mo Yanshao reminded him again. Remember to go to the finance office to get your salary card and this month's magic pill. Last month you had a first-level salary. This month you officially become a summoner, and you will be calculated based on the second-level basic salary. What's the base salary for level 2? 99,000 yuan per month. 99,000 a month is more than 1 million a year. I didn't expect it would be so easy to make over 1 million a year after becoming a summoner. It's always nice to hear about a salary increase. Xiaopingyan took the box of the slave soldier realm pearl in his hand, left Mo Yanshao's office, and went directly to the finance room. Sister Lu from the finance office rarely took care of her bonsai today, but sat behind a desk. Hello, Sister Lu. Pingyan, long time no see. Seeing Xiaopingyan come in, Sister Lu directly handed Xiaopingyan an envelope and a fist-sized wooden box. Your salary card and salary slip are inside the envelope. In this medicine box is the first-level divine power pill you received this month. This level of divine power pill can supplement your 20 points of divine power. You can take it when you go back. Come here and sign. Xiaopingyan took the pen and wrote his name on a form. Pingyan, you are doing well. You have earned more than 7 million in just 1 month after joining the company. Sister Lu praised Xiaopingyan. More than 7 million? Xiaopingyan was stunned for a moment, then smiled. Sister Lu, are you kidding me? My basic salary for level 1 is 69,000 yuan, and Director Mo said my salary will only be raised to level 2 this month. Yes, your first level salary is 69,000 yuan, but didn't you go to the provincial headquarters to perform a special mission last month? Your bonus for that special mission was more than 7 million yuan. I checked and there is no mistake. Yes, Sister Lu said. The last time I went to the provincial headquarters, wasn't it just a fight in the death arena, where I killed a scumbag? Why did I get so much bonus? Okay, thank you, Sister Lu, I'll go back and have a look. Xiaopingyan left the finance room and went directly back to his room. Then he opened his own envelope in the room. There was a black bank card and a salary slip in the envelope. He glanced at the salary slip. The salary slip, the basic salary for the first level is 69,000 yuan, which will be paid in full in May. In addition to the basic salary for this level, the largest amount on the salary slip comes from the task bonus. The mission bonus is a full 7.56 million. Adding the two together, the total pre-tax salary and bonus received by Xiaopingyan is 7,629,000 yuan. The summoner has a tax-free income limit of 3 million yuan every month. The part he needs to pay in taxes is 4,629,000 yuan. After deducting the tax part, the total salary and bonus received is 711,9810. Earned 7 million in 1 month. Xiaopingyan was a little confused. He took out his mobile phone and checked the bank balance of his salary card. The bank balance was indeed 7,119,810 yuan. He thought for a while and called Yan Duo directly. Hello. Yan Duo's voice came from the phone, lazily and without any energy. I want to ask if there was a mission bonus last time I went to the death arena. I saw it today. The bonus was 7.56 million. Humph, are you showing off to me? It's just more than 7 million, a little drizzle. If it weren't for, forget it, even if you say it, you don't understand. I want to ask, how come you have so much money? It's only more than 7.56 million, how much is it? Yan Duo's voice was like a castrated cat. 3 million of it is your entry fee for the death battle, and it is also a life fee, whether you win or lose. the 4.56 million, it's your 5% share of the gaming revenue from that game. This 7.56 million is your bonus from that mission. It's a reasonable income. Is there any problem? Xiaopinggan suppressed his excitement and took a deep breath. Okay, no problem, I understand. If you have another chance to end up in the future, you can continue to look for me. I will treat you to a feast. What the hell, you are now a summoner, and there is no suitable place for you in Great Yan Kingdom. Oh, by the way, do you think you have too much money to spend? You can lend me some. I have recently. Ah, the signal here is not very good. I want to go into the tunnel and I can't hear you. Hey, what are you saying? I can't hear you. I've hung up. Beep 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 beep. Yan Duo, who was in Xinquan, looked at his cell phone and the blind tone coming from it. He was stunned for 2 seconds, his eyes twitched, and he cursed, Xiaopinggan, you bastard, don't let me meet you again. The scolding continued, but after finishing the scolding, Yan Duo looked at the salary slip in his hand, which showed an income of more than 1 million, and couldn't help but frown. Alas, he was too poor. The basic salary of level 6 plus a little mission bonus. I earned more than 1 million last month, and I can't even reach the basic tax-free limit. This amount of money is not enough to spend, and it's not enough to fill the gap between my teeth. I have to find a way to make some money, otherwise how can I buy boundary beads? After hanging up Yan Duo's call, Xiaopinggan walked around his office excitedly. Yesterday, he thought he was a standard poor man. Unexpectedly, he would make a fortune today. The words of the summoner who is not poor are still that's right. Just then, the phone rang again, it was Uncle Joe. Xiaopinggan answered the phone. Hello, Uncle Joe. Director Mo said that you drove a shabby second-hand pickup truck to work today. It's a bit shabby. Let me clean it up for you. You must be too stingy. You want to take that shabby second-hand pickup truck around and let people know about it? From now on, there are no summoners willing to join the Xianghe City Order Committee. Send the car keys to the robot, and you want me to help you clean it up. Xiaopinggan was a little embarrassed. Uncle Joe, I didn't expect so much when I bought it, so I bought it because I thought the car was okay. Wait a moment, I'll let the robot deliver the key to you. You can look at it as you like. Do it. It's like saying, okay, don't worry, I will take care of it for you. Xiaopinggan didn't leave the office. He called a robot in, threw his car keys to the robot, and asked the robot to deliver the keys. After waiting for a while, Xiaopinggan's mood completely calmed down, and then he took the metal box containing the slave soldier world pearl and entered the training room. In the training room, Xiaopinggan opened the metal box and saw a shimmering boundary bead in the box. Gray mist rolled in the boundary bead, and 4 small seal divine words connected into one were looming. Changing sides before the battle. These are the words on the divine inscription that Xiaopinggan saw. As soon as he saw this word, Xiaopinggan knew why the slave soldier world bead could summon slave soldiers, and Mo Yanshao said that the success rate of fusing this world bead was high. The defection before the battle occurred in the Battle of Mui. This battle took place in the last years of the Yin and Shang dynasties, that is, in the 11th century BC. It was the last battle of King Wu of Zhou against King Zhou of Shang. The specific time when the Battle of Makino took place is still somewhat debated among historians, but it does not affect the existence and historical significance of this battle. King Zhou of Shang dynasty was ignorant and cruel. During the battle, the slave soldiers of the Shang dynasty's front army defected in front of the battle line, which directly led to the collapse of the Shang dynasty army and ruined the Yin and Shang dynasty in one fell swoop. If you want to fuse this world bead, your role in the world bead is likely to be a slave soldier who defected before the formation. A smooth battle should be able to complete the fusion. Thinking of this, Xiaopinggan turned the ring on his hand to reveal the silver needle, pricked his finger with the silver needle, and dropped 2 drops of blood on the boundary bead. In a short time, Xiaoping'an turned into a cocoon of light and entered the world of the boundary pearl. The sun was shining brightly above his head, and in Kaoh City, Xiaoping'an suddenly opened his eyes. In front of him was a long queue. The people in the queue were in ragged clothes. Everyone was huddled together. They stood sadly and numbly in an open space, watching a ceremony in front of them. Xiaoping'an himself was in the queue in ragged clothes and was also one of the slaves. In front of the slaves were 2 rows of sergeants holding spears and wearing armor. The ceremony was held in an open space. There were a lot of building materials, including stones and wood, piled around the open space. There were some people in luxurious clothes surrounding the middle of the venue, talking and laughing softly. Before Xiaoping'an could figure out what was going on around him, there was a commotion in the crowd. Amid a burst of crying, Xiaoping'an saw more than a dozen slaves tied with leather straps being led up. Those slaves were male and female, old and young, half of them were children under 10 years old, 6 in total. All the slaves were tied into a string and led out by a group of sergeants. The tied slaves' faces were pale and their bodies were shaking with fear. They seemed to know what was going to happen next and began to cry. Looking at the construction site in front of him, and then at the slaves being escorted up, Xiaoping'an suddenly thought of something, and his face changed slightly. The open space in front of him looked like a construction site that was about to start construction, and it was definitely not a good thing for the slaves to be tied up and led up at this time. Could it be foundation laying? Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 57. Seeing the slaves being led up, the richly dressed nobles surrounding the venue stopped talking and looked at the slaves being led up one by one, making comments there. A middle-aged nobleman looked up at the sun in the sky, said softly, and gestured to the soldiers around him. Some followers took out incense, inserted it on the ground, and lit it. The nobles began to kneel on the ground and worship and pray to the lit incense. Then, someone took out a bronze vessel and sprinkled some plant ash in the bronze vessel around the open space, defining a range on the ground. Then, a witch dressed like a goddess, with colorful feathers all over her body, and a wooden pole tied with colorful cloth strips began to appear. She jumped up in the open space with 2 feet. Shifting around on the ground, turning upside down, mumbling words, and occasionally waving the wooden pole around. After the dance was over, the witch exited and the nobles nodded. The auspicious time has come, let's start the festival. As this sound appeared, the more than 10 slaves who were led up cried and struggled. Mom, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. The little girl in the slave screamed, desperately trying to hide in her mother's arms. An old slave with gray hair was crying. He held another little boy in his arms and covered the little boy's eyes with one hand. Several slaves were struggling. But the struggles of those slaves were in vain. The soldiers who were escorting them forced all the adults to kneel on the ground, stepped on their feet, raised their swords, and chopped off their heads one by one. The heads with fearful and painful expressions were cut off, rolled to the ground. The blood of the adults whose heads had been chopped off spattered on the bodies and faces of the children. The children were so frightened that they cried, and some were frightened and fainted. Mom, Mom. The little slave girl watched her headless mother's body fall down, sitting in a pool of blood, her eyes dull, but her mother's cry, wanted to grab her mother's head. The blood of the old slave holding the little boy dripped from the little boy's head, turning the little boy into a bloody man. Even in the boundary pearl, even though he already knew what would happen, Xiaoping'an couldn't bear to close his eyes after witnessing this inhumane scene. This was common in slave societies. If Xiaoping'an was asked to find the 2 most cruel Chinese characters in the history of China where slavery existed, these 2 Chinese characters would be foundation. In this era, whenever slave owners wanted to build a new high-rise palace or mansion, a foundation-laying ceremony would be held, and slaves would become the victims of this foundation-laying ceremony. When the construction of the house started, the slaves would be killed alive. Use your own bones to lay them under the tall buildings and luxurious houses, and use your own flesh and blood to become the building materials for the slave owners' tall buildings and luxurious houses. In addition to the time when construction begins, when the foundation is laid, when the walls are cast, when the gate is installed, and when the building is completed, slaves will be killed to offer sacrifices to the house. Slave owners believed that by doing so, they could keep their tall buildings and mansions standing and their wealth and prosperity continue. Among the many archaeological excavations of later generations, under the remains of the gorgeous buildings of this era, there are piles of corpses of slaves, stained with blood and tears. Just one palace ruins in Hunan used 889 living people to lay the foundation. The broken necks of the decapitated slaves were bleeding profusely. The luxuriously dressed slave owners looked at all this with smiles, and then ordered the soldiers to drag the corpses of the dead slaves around the open space several times. The soldiers raised the slaves' feet and placed their broken necks on the ground, so that all the blood in the slaves' bodies could be forced out. The blood sprayed by the slaves was sprinkled all over the walls of the high-rise mansion they were going to build. On the ground, Xiaopingan and the other slaves were watching from the side. After the blood of the decapitated corpses was completely drained, some of the slaves in front were driven forward and several large pits were dug on the ground. One of the large pits contained the remains of the adults who had their heads cut off. The corpses and the children were thrown into another pit and buried alive without beheading. Finally, the groundbreaking ceremony was completed. The slave owners who completed the groundbreaking ceremony looked up at the scorching sun above their heads, and then left in carriages with satisfied smiles, leaving overseers and soldiers to guard the place. Hurry up, work. The overseers waved their whips and hit the slaves, and began to direct the slaves to work and carry construction materials. Pa Xiaopingan moved a piece of wood and whipped him with the whip. Hurry up, don't be lazy. The overseer yelled. Looking at the soldiers holding weapons and armor around him, Xiaopingan moved things silently without saying a word. The slaves worked silently until it got dark and everyone was exhausted. Only then did the supervisors and soldiers escort Xiaopingan and the others back to their homes. Xiaopingan walked in Chaoji city and looked at the capital of the Yin and Shang dynasties. The houses of slave owners in this era were easy to distinguish. Almost all slave owners lived in SIA, large and small, which were relatively exquisite and tall. Double houses, while civilians live in relatively low suite rooms or single houses. A single house is a separate room, and a suite room is also very simple, it is two rooms connected together with a door in the middle. In a commoner's room, the largest furniture is an earthen bed and a stove. Slaves were not qualified to live in houses. Xiaopingan and the others were driven into some simple sheds and crypts. The sheds were built with the simplest wood and grass leaves, and the crypts were holes dug underground, like doghouse. No, in the eyes of many slave owners, the life of a slave is not as valuable as a good dog. The underground was dark and damp. Many of the slaves around Xiaopingan had some twisted joints in their hands and feet because they had lived in the cave for a long time. They appeared to be suffering from very serious rheumatic bone disease. As for the food of the slaves, it was some bran pancakes and some boiled gruel. Xiaopingan held a piece of burnt bran cake and squatted silently in the hut, looking at the people in front of him. Slaves lived a life worse than pigs and dogs. Hatred is buried in their hearts, and everyone's appearance looks the same, dirty and numb, as if they are soulless bodies. This kind of life lasted for 5 full days. On the 6th day, the foundation had not been completely laid, so Xiaopingan and the others stopped work. That night, they had an unprecedented meal of noodles and millet porridge. That day, Xiaopingan heard the supervisor chatting with the soldiers, saying that King Wu's army was coming. The atmosphere in Kaoj city became tense, and the nobles living in the Siachong house were panicked. On the 7th day, All the slaves in Kyoch City were organized, issued weapons, and brought to Mue. All the slaves knew that King Wu's army had opened. When King Wu's army did not attack, the slaves were just sacrificial objects for the nobles in the Asiachong house. They could be killed and buried at will, and lived like pigs and dogs. King Wu's army came, and the nobles gave the slaves a delicious meal, and then gave the slaves weapons, and asked the slaves to go to the battlefield and fight to protect the nobles. To the noble people, everything seems to be going smoothly, just as it should be. But for the slaves, an inexplicable aura is restless among the slaves, as restless as Mars. Slaves have no status and are as humble as grass, but they are not stupid. Even a dog knows that it will wag its tail to whomever is nice to it, let alone a person. Would a dog desperately protect a person who would beat it with a stick at any time, abuse it, kill it at every turn, and kill its wife, children, and children? Dogs don't. Not only would it not happen, the dog would definitely bare its teeth and growl at that person, wishing it could turn into a wolf and tear that person's throat to shreds. Then why do a group of slave owners in Kyoch City take it for granted that the thousands of slaves they use to lay the foundations of their houses and palaces will protect their houses and palaces? Xiaopingan has never thought about this problem. Between the slave and the slave owner, there must be one who is dumber than a dog and the other who is smarter than a dog, otherwise such an incredible arrangement would not have happened. At dawn on the morning of the 8th day, Xiaopingan saw King Wu of Zhou's army on the vast pasture. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 58. The morning light shines on Mue, and a gentle breeze blows across the vast grassland like a blue wave. Today is a nice day, but a war destined to go down in history will begin here today. The so-called Mue refers to the wilderness for grazing. This is the largest pasture outside Kyoch City. Usually there are herds of cattle and sheep, bison, antelopes, and elk can be seen everywhere. But now that the war is coming, the chilling atmosphere has made those in Mue the wild animals stayed away from the battlefield. The low sound of war drums echoed in the Makino, making the air in the Makino even more tense. Dong 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 dong. Amidst the sound of war drums, the governor of the slave army on King Zhou's side waved his flag and loudly ordered, "Enter." The governors were riding horses, followed by several soldiers, urging loudly behind the slave army. The soldiers waved their whips, and the whips kept exploding in the air, urging the slave army in front to move forward. In front of those military governors was an army of more than 200,000 slaves urgently recruited from inside and outside Kyoch City and sent to the battlefield. Xiaopingan was among the army of slaves. At this moment, Xiaopingan's heart was not filled with fear, but excitement. Because, he finally proved one thing. In ancient China, the giant race did exist, and they lived in symbiosis with the human race. In ancient China, giants were not called giants, but giants. Regarding giants, there are many records in Chinese history books. Legend has it that when Dao controlled the floods, he subdued the giant clan and asked the giants to help control the floods. Qin Shi Huang also had a giant general named Wang Zhong. Wang Mang usurped the Han dynasty, and Wang Mang also subdued the giant general. The giant general was known as the Big Mac, and he was Wang Mang's #1 general. New Book of Tang is the official history. There is a record about giants in New Book of Tang, which says, "The people of the Longmen are 3 feet long, have serrated teeth and claws, and are covered with black hair. They do not eat fire." Giants do not eat fire. They can make fire, cannibalize people, rob women everywhere, and threaten the country's borders. In the hidden historical legends, during the Sui and Tang dynasties, the several military campaigns of the Han people in the north were all related to the Chan Gran clan. The last time a giant appeared in the history of China was in the Ming dynasty. During the Qinjue period of the Ming dynasty, soldiers from the Jiangsu guards were in danger at sea and floated to a small island in a boat. A giant was seen on that island, and the giant chased him. Those soldiers, the soldiers escaped by boat. During the fight, a Ming soldier cut off a giant's finger, which was 1 foot and 4 inches long, and finally kept it in the Jiating treasury. As for the archaeological community, legend has it that giant remains have been discovered all over the world. In his previous life, Xiaoping'an searched for traces of giants all over the world. By chance, he saw a leg bone of a giant. At this moment, Xiaoping'an saw the giant in the army of King Zhou of Shang. A total of 18 giants. The giant was 7 or 8 meters tall and was under the banner behind the army of King Zhou of Shang. From a distance, as long as you turn your head, you can see the 18 giants. There are burning fires in front of the 18 giants. They hold large red-hot wooden stakes in their hands and roar. It looks majestic and very scary. Before those giants, there were several military formations. In that military formation, there were 24 strong men who could lift huge rocks weighing more than 1,000 kilograms. Those 24 people were also giants, but they did not have giants holding copper rods on their bodies. The people were so tall, and huge rocks were placed in front of them. Before those 24 men, there were 3,000 warriors with bare arms who could lift an entire ox. Before those 3,000 people, there were another 5,000 soldiers who were carrying spears on their backs, walking as fast as flying, and throwing spears with perfect accuracy. In front of those 5,000 people, there were tens of thousands of soldiers from King Zhou of Shang. The tens of thousands of soldiers were divided into several large formations and were ready. And before those tens of thousands of soldiers, there are slave soldiers like Xiaoping'an. The number of slave soldiers is the largest, more than 200,000. The black slave soldiers were like a tide. Under the urging of the rear governor, each one held the long spear in his hand and moved forward slowly. There are also some slaves who just hold sharpened wooden sticks as spears. Xiaoping'an was assigned a changa because he was still strong. Xiaoping'an held a changa in his hand. The changa had a wooden pole more than 3 meters long and the copper head was very sharp. An atmosphere of restlessness and tension spread among the slave army. Not long after, King Wu's army also appeared in front, driving over in darkness. Judging from the number of people, King Wu's army was not as large as King Zhou of Shang, but there were many flags of the princes in King Wu's army. Looking at it, there were hundreds of colorful and various flags of the princes, among which on both sides of the largest banner with the word Zhou, there are 8 princes' flags that are extremely prominent. Xiaoping'an looked around and saw one word on each of the 8 princes' flags, namely Yang, Shu, Qiang, Wei, Lu, Peng, Bo. 8 characters, each character refers to a vassal state. Legend has it that when King Wu of Zhou defeated Zhou, 800 princes helped him. Now it seems that there are not 800, but there are still hundreds of large and small ones. According to the standards of this era, the areas under the jurisdiction of some princes may only be a few villages. Bringing dozens or hundreds of people, once the flag is raised, it can be regarded as a country, which can strengthen the momentum of King Wu's army. But the most important princes are the 8 countries. This is the earliest 8-nation alliance in Chinese history. Although the allied forces of the Qiang, Wei, Lu, Peng, Bo, and other vassal states were dressed a little strangely, they were not too special. Xiaoping'an's eyes saw that facing the Shu army under the banner of Shu. Looking from a distance, I saw that all the troops under the banner of Shu were wearing strange copper masks on their faces. The copper masks, with bulging eyes, were exactly the same as the strange bronze masks found in Sangxingdui. Appearance. After King Wu's army, there were also giants holding large wooden stakes to help. The armies of both sides stopped about a mile apart. The air in Makino was extremely tense at this time. Facing King Wu's army, the slave army of King Zhou of Shang continued to be restless. The governor officers were on horseback, running back and forth in the ranks behind the slave army, swinging their whips from time to time and shouting, hold on, All the slave soldiers obey the order. As soon as King Wu's army moves, you will all rush forward. In those boring movies and TV dramas, on such a battlefield, the commanders and generals of both sides can always say a few words and talk about family matters when they meet. This is actually nonsense. On the battlefield of such a war, a person can, no matter how loud your voice is, it can only be heard by the people around you. It can only be heard 100 meters away. The distance between the armies of both sides was 1 mile away, and the restless sounds of the armies and the neighing of chariots and horses had already covered up all the surrounding sounds. The only things that can communicate on the battlefield of a great war are flags, drums, and horns. Xiaoping'an, who was in the crowd, tried his best to look at the Zhou banner on King Wu's side. He could only vaguely see a bunch of warriors standing under the banner, holding shields, and some generals riding on horses. Behind the generals, there was a chariot. There was a group of armored guards beside the chariot, and there seemed to be several figures on top of the chariot. That should be King Wu of Zhou, Zhang Taigong, and others. As for King Zhou of Shang at the back, the same is true. King Zhou's carriage is behind the army and is heavily guarded. Looking from a distance, you can only see a banner fluttering. What King Zhou and Daji look like are completely visible here. Less than. The stalemate between the two sides did not last long. A trumpet sound suddenly came from King Zhou Wu's army. In the sound of the trumpet, a large flag with the word LV flew from a large waving banner. A general on a horse, he led a cavalry of thousands of people and rushed towards the army of King Zhou of Shang. King Wu began to attack. Looking at the word Lu, Xiaoping'an knew that the first general sent by King Wu was indeed Lu Wang. Historical records record that Lu Wang was the first to go out, which seems to be true. Since Lu Wang was so brave, he might be Lu Buletin's ancestor. Seeing the cavalry coming from the opposite side, the slave army on King Zhou's side became even more restless. Some slaves showed fear on their faces, and some turned to look at the governors behind them, with hatred flashing in their eyes. "Come on, charge me up." The governor officer's eyes were red and he was roaring angrily. Several slaves were afraid and wanted to retreat, but the governor officers drew their swords and hacked them to the ground. "If you don't move now, wait until later. That army of more than 100,000 slaves is just a little short of a spark. I am that spark." Without saying a word, Xiaoping'an turned around, holding the changa in his hand, and rushed towards the nearest military governor on horseback. With just one dash forward, the changa thrust out and stabbed the military governor off his horse. All the slaves around were stunned. The soldiers around the governor officers were also shocked. It seemed that they had never thought that the slaves would resist. "Brothers, Shang Zhou was unethical and oppressed and killed countless of our brothers and family members. Do we still have to work for Shang Zhou at this time, so that those nobles can continue to ride on our heads in the future, continue to use us to bury them with them, and use our children? Are you going to lay the foundation for their palace towers? Let's kill those beasts with me." Xiaoping'an roared angrily. Before the soldiers around the governor could react, Chang Ji swung out and slashed one soldier on the neck and chopped down another. The slave soldiers were awakened and saw someone taking the lead. The slaves, who had already been restless and full of hatred among the slave soldiers, immediately imitated the same example and rushed towards the governor officers behind them. Using their hands with his long spear and spear, he stabbed the governor officers off their horses in one go. 1 spreads to 10, 10 spreads to 100, 100 spreads to 1,000. The army of more than 100,000 slave soldiers instantly became restless and roared angrily. The slave soldiers turned around, with red eyes, and attacked the officers behind them. Thousands of long swords and spears turned around and aimed at those who usually dominate the slave soldiers, use the slaves to lay foundations, but push the slave soldiers to the battlefield during the war. Let the slave soldiers work for them to protect their glory and wealth. Do those people think slave soldiers are worse than dogs? Kill King Zhou, kill those beasts riding on our heads. Kill those beasts who use our flesh and blood to lay the foundations of their palaces and mansions. Kill them. The usually suppressed hatred of the slave soldiers burst out. The several governors' soldiers in front of Xiaopinggan were stabbed to pulp by thousands of spears without waiting for Xiaopinggan to take action. The army of more than 100,000 slave soldiers, like a tide, turned around, pointed their weapons at the army of King Zhou of Shang, shouted, and rushed towards the army of King Zhou of Shang. At this moment, the drums of King Wu's army thundered and the horns sounded. Just behind Lu Wang's cavalry, King Wu's army attacked in full force, making a thunderous roar and rushing towards King Zhou of Shang's army. In King Zhou's army of Shang dynasty, the tens of thousands of soldiers on King Zhou's side behind the more than 200,000 slave soldiers were stunned when they saw that the slave army in front of them actually turned against them and rushed towards them. It collapsed all of a sudden. Some of the princes on King Zhou's side were the first to turn around and run away. As soon as the princes on King Zhou's side ran away with their soldiers, the formation of tens of thousands of soldiers was loosened, and their morale collapsed instantly. Before it was touched, it collapsed like an avalanche in the blink of an eye. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 59. None of the slave soldiers around him knew how to ride a horse, so Xiaopingyan easily snatched a horse from the governor's officer, rode on the horse, and followed the large army to kill King Zhou's army. On such a battlefield, it is easier for people to understand the true meaning of the phrase defeat like a mountain. Why is it like a mountain falling? The domino effect on the battlefield. The collapse and defection of the army of slave soldiers directly defeated King Zhou's regular army behind them. As soon as King Zhou's princes began to grease their feet, the entire King Zhou's army fell into pieces and their morale collapsed. King Zhou's 5,000 spearmen array then collapsed. After the spearmen, those powerful men who could lift oxen and throw rocks also turned and ran away. The 18 giants were stunned while holding the burning stakes, then turned and ran away. Above Mui, King Zhou's army collapsed before it came into contact with King Wu's troops. There were fleeing people everywhere, and King Wu's army rushed in behind the slave soldiers. The world of the Shang dynasty, which had been inherited for more than 500 years, suddenly collapsed in the midst of the defection of slave soldiers in front of the battlefield, and the pastoral industry outside Kaohsiung city. Seeing the collapse of the army, the tall flags and chariots of King Zhou of Shang began to fly back towards Kaohsiung city. Xiaopingyan was on horseback, chasing the flag of King Zhou of Shang. Chang Ji had been abandoned by him. He grabbed a bronze sword and a whip, and galloped on his horse. He held the sword in his left hand and danced the whip in his right hand, chasing the retreating flag of King Zhou of Shang dynasty. At this point, when the world beads were integrated, Xiaopingyan felt that he had already finished the historical drama of defecting before the battle. He chased the banner of King Zhou of Shang, just to see with his own eyes what King Zhou of Shang and Sudaji, who could bring trouble to the world, looked like, and to satisfy his historical curiosity. At the same time, he also wanted to try to see if he could maximize the benefits of the slave soldier world pearl and create another perfect absorption. Because he had heard before that although the slave soldier world bead is the easiest to fuse, the slave soldiers summoned by different summoners have different abilities, some are strong and some are weak. So, now you can give it another try. Xiaopingyan wielded a long whip and a long sword. Anyone who dared to attack him along the way was slapped in the face with the long whip in his hand, or was chopped down by the copper sword, and fell to the ground screaming. At this time, after all, only a few people dared to stop and wave a knife behind them to resist. Most of the deserters left their backs to the chasing army. There were too few who dared to turn around and face the angry tide behind them. Some of them couldn't run, so they jumped directly into the Makino River, or knelt down and surrendered. King Wu has an order, only to kill King Zhou. Those who kneel down and surrender will avoid death. King Wu's generals Lu Wang and the cavalry led by Lu Wang were shouting from behind, and the sound spread throughout Mui. Upon hearing this sound, the remaining will of King Zhou's army to resist quickly collapsed. The bronze long sword in Xiaoping'an's hand only cut down a few people. After hitting the armor twice, the bronze long sword was bent and the edge was broken. Xiaoping'an dropped his bronze sword and only used his whip to whip his horse, chasing King Zhou's banner closely. I saw a rucksack left by a hurler on the ground in front of me. There were several hurlers in the rucksack. When Xiaoping'an was galloping past on horseback, he pulled out his long whip, rolled it around the rucksack, and was wrapped up by the rucksack. Stand up. There are several throwing guns in the backpack. On the road ahead, a giant of King Zhou of Shang stayed behind, waving a large burning stake in his hand and sniping at the pursuers behind him. That giant was so terrifying. The big wooden stake in his hand was like a pillar, 4 or 5 meters long, and it was still burning. The giant swung, and the 4 to 5 meter long large wooden stake made a whistling sound in the air, and sparks flew everywhere. With just one stick, the cavalrymen and horses on King Wu's side could be smashed into pieces or fly more than 10 meters away. Outside, a few people who rushed close were grabbed by the giant and bit off their heads with one mouthful. The cavalry horses were afraid of fire and did not dare to approach the burning stumps when they saw them. Suddenly, people and horses were on the road, and only the roar of the giant could be heard, 1 against 10,000. Xiaoping'an galloped his horse, drew out a throwing spear, and before he could get close to the giant 30 meters away, he used the momentum of the horse to throw the throwing spear at the giant. The giant's target was huge. Xiaoping'an's spear hit the giant's belly, and the spear sank 2 feet into the giant's belly. The giant screamed in pain, and the big burning stake in his hand fell down. He bent his legs and the body also knelt on the ground. The giant took out his throwing spear, glared at Xiaoping'an, and threw the throwing spear towards Xiaoping'an. It's just that the giant is not good at using these exquisite weapons for ordinary people. The spear he threw was more than 1 meter high from Xiaoping'an's head, carrying a bad wind and spinning around 100 meters away. Seeing that the big burning stake in the giant's hand finally fell to the ground, several of King Wu's chariots rushed forward. The soldiers on the chariots carried 4 or 5 meter long spears directly into the giant's body. In the blink of an eye, the giant fell on the road covered in blood. Before the giant fell, Xiaoping'an had already rode around the giant and continued to chase King Zhou's flag. Along the way from Wei to Kaoch, the armor, chariots, and flags discarded by King Zhou's army, and the flags of nobles who once stood high, were left on the road to be trampled upon. King Zhou fled from the city in embarrassment with his men. Before the city gate could be closed, the defeated soldiers behind him swarmed in. The soldiers guarding the city ran away, and no one was in charge of the entire city gate. The entire Kaoch city has become a mess. King Wu's cavalry had already rushed into the city, shouting everywhere, "King Wu has an order, only King Zhou will be killed. Those who kneel down and surrender will avoid death." Xiaoping'an rode directly into Kaoch city and rushed towards Lutai. Lutai is the most gorgeous super palace in the world, built by King Zhou, who mobilized the whole country, spent 7 years, killed countless slaves, and spent countless money to build it. The entire Lutai is more than 2,000 meters long and wide. It is backed by the Taihang Mountains. Lutai is home to rare treasures from all over the world. It is full of rugged rocks, lush vines, green bamboos, and towering pines and cypresses. In the center of Lutai, there is a huge high platform covering an area of more than 100 acres. On the high platform, there are magnificent houses and mansions, as high as 7 stories. The luxury is indescribable. Xiaoping'an, who rushed into Lutai, was shocked by the gorgeous scene in Lutai for a while. At this time, he finally understood why there was such a record in historical records: hefty taxes to achieve real results. Money from Lutai. Lutai is a place where the wealth of the world is gathered together for people to have fun. Lutai was full of running maids and eunuchs, and exquisite utensils, jade, and jewelry were scattered everywhere. The guard had already disappeared. Seeing the Xiaopingan he was carrying riding his horse into the deer platform, the palace maids and eunuchs all screamed and fled in all directions. No one dared to step forward. Everyone was only focused on escaping for their lives, and the money and treasures swept into the deer platform. In this chaos, when Xiaopingan rode his horse to the 7-story high platform in the core area of Lutai where King Zhou was located, the gorgeous 7-story high platform was already blazing with flames and thick smoke. On the tallest building, a crazy figure laughed amidst the firelight and smoke. The figure was covered in pearls and jade. While drinking wine, he continued to sprinkle the wine, jewelry, silk, and satin onto the raging fire around him. Above. Ha ha ha, they are all buried with me, they are all buried with me. The sound of King Zhou's wild laughter could be heard from the high building. Is that King Zhou? Across the blazing fire, Xiaopingan still couldn't see clearly what King Zhou looked like, nor did he see Sudaji. Pity. The fire on the terrace was too strong. Xiaopingan grabbed a throwing spear next to him and threw it towards the figure of King Zhou in the firelight and thick smoke. The moment the spear disappeared into the fire and smoke, before Xiaopingan could see whether it hit or not, the entire world of the boundary pearl was shattered at the same time and turned into light mist. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 60. The world of Jizu was shattered, and Xiaopingan's consciousness appeared in the secret mandala in his sea of consciousness in the blink of an eye. The temple in the middle of the secret mandala seems to have grown a bit larger. On the caisson dome of the temple, the number of floating divine light clusters has turned into 85 clusters. The last night when the brain-eating worms were eliminated, Xiaopingan only consumed 5 points of divine power, leaving 65 points of divine power. At this moment, after fusing the slave soldier realm bead, his divine power increased by 20 points, and his available divine power has become 85 points, and the upper limit of divine power is 90 points. In addition to the 20 extra points of divine power, in the temple in front of you, there is another granite wall on the left side under the steps opposite the 3 white jade reliefs of Xuanhuan, Chao, and Chenin. A large relief sculpture was created, and the story in the relief was about defection in battle. On the large granite relief, the scene of the Battle of Makino is vividly reproduced, and the characters in it are lifelike. Among those reliefs is a slave soldier, who is particularly vivid and has a different color from the other figures in the reliefs. The slave soldier is at the C position of the granite relief. He holds a long sword in both hands and carries several spears on his back. The slave soldier points to the crooked and fleeing flag of King Zhou and a giant blocking the road in the distance, shouting something in his mouth. Xiaopingan had seen slave soldiers several times, but looking at the slave soldier on the new relief, he felt that it was different from the slave soldiers summoned by Mo Yanshao, Li Yunzhou, and others he had seen before. The slave soldiers summoned by Mo Yanshao and others were all holding spears, but the slave soldiers on the relief in front of them were holding long guns, and they also carried throwing spears on their backs. Their weapons and equipment were completely different. The divine power obtained by Mo Yanshao and others from fusing the slave soldier world beads is generally between 10 and 15 points. Very few people can break through 16 points, and the divine power they obtain is 20 points. There is no doubt that this time it is a perfect blend. Looking at the floating light groups of divine power in the sky of the caisson of the temple, Xiaopingan thought for a while, and with a thought, the light groups flew towards the slave soldier relief one by one and merged into the slave soldier relief. After incorporating 10 points of divine power, the slave soldier's relief began to glow, and then the slave soldier came to life. A strong slave soldier with a long sword and a spear on his back walked out of the granite relief. He saluted the 3 reliefs that laid the foundation, then walked out of the temple and came to the ink painting-like sculpture outside. Among the tribal villages, they began to patrol the edge of the black mist attentively. This is the first time that Xiaopingan summons characters in the secret mandala. Watching the slave soldiers begin patrolling the tribal villages in the secret mandala, Xiaopingan felt as if he was watching an animated movie. It was so amazing. He stared at the patrolling slave soldier with his consciousness, but after his eyes stayed focused on the slave soldier for a few seconds, a few lines of white writing appeared on the slave soldier's head. Summon character, Elite Slave Soldier. Consumption of Divine Power, 10. Lives, 65. Wisdom, 50. Force, 17. Skills, 1 Changji, 2 Throwing Spear. Plane arrival time, 360 minutes. Looking at the character attributes of the slave soldier, Xiaopingan discovered the difference. According to the information he had learned before, although other people fuse 10 points of divine power to fuse the slave soldier world pearl, they generally summon slave soldiers, not elite slave soldiers. The health of ordinary slave soldiers is between 50 and 55 points, the wisdom is about 40 and 45 points, the force is only between 10 and 14, and there is only one skill, either spear or long sword, and the elite slave soldiers you summon, but there is an additional spear throwing skill. The plane arrival time is the duration of summoning the characters in the secret mandala into reality. Both ordinary slave soldiers and elite slave soldiers are 360 minutes and 6 hours. Of course, these 360 minutes refer to the longest duration for a slave soldier to be summoned without being attacked by other attacks. If it is in battle, the summoned slave soldier may be dead in a few minutes. The slave soldiers who are summoned and come to reality cannot be reused to return to the secret mandala. All summoned characters are summoned once. Some characters can summon many at a time, but some special characters and characters can only summon one at a time. Looking at the 75 points of divine power he still had left, Xiaopingan directly summoned 3 elite slave soldiers in one breath. After the 2 elite slave soldiers summoned from behind were summoned, they also saluted the 3 white jade reliefs, then walked out of the temple, formed a team with the first elite slave soldier, and began to paint the same ink painting. Patrolling among the tribal villages. The originally monotonous secret mandala suddenly became lively with people who could move around. There are still 55 points of divine power left. Xiaopingan thought for a while, spent 5 points of divine power, and summoned a farmer from the relief of Shenan. Summon character, farmer. Consumption of divine power, 5. Life, 60. Wisdom, 45. Force, 3. Skills, 1 Farming, 2 Silkworm Raising, 3 Tea Picking. Plane arrival time, 720 minutes. The summoned farmer saluted the 3 white jade reliefs, walked out of the temple, and went to the farmland outside the tribe. He found a piece of farmland and started working. Interesting. Xiaopingan summoned another craftsman. Summoned character, elite craftsman. Consumption of divine power, 6. Life, 60. Wisdom, 55. Force, 3. Skills, 1 Make farm tools, 2 Make linen, 3 Make arrows, 4 Make pottery, 5 Boil salt, 6 Make lyres, 7 Carpentry. Plane arrival time, 1080 minutes. Hey, this elite craftsman seems to be a little different from ordinary craftsmen. The last time I fused the Divine World Bead, I basically reproduced all the tools invented by the Shennan clan, so I guess I was able to summon elite craftsmen. The summoned elite craftsman also saluted the 3 reliefs in the temple, then walked out of the temple and came to a small workshop of the tribe. After summoning the elite craftsman, there are still 44 points of divine power left. Xiaopingan thought for a while, and without rest, he directly summoned the alchemist from the relief of Shenan. Summoned character, level 1 alchemist. Consumption of divine power, 12. Lives, 68. Wisdom, 61. Force, 5. Skill, refining first level elixir. Plane arrival time, 1080 minutes. The summoned alchemist looked like a fairy and had an elegant temperament. After saluting the three reliefs, he left the temple and came to a small courtyard on the hillside of the tribal village. He picked up a backpack and wore it. He picked up the medicine hoe and walked directly into the black mist, seemingly to collect medicine. Amazing. Xiaoping'an was stunned. The characters summoned into the secret mandala almost seemed real. There are still 32 points left in the divine power. Xiaoping'an continued to consume 12 points of divine power and summoned 3 fireballs to float in the temple for later use. In the end, there were only 20 points of divine power left in the caisson sky of the temple. After seeing that it was almost done, Xiaoping'an withdrew his consciousness from the secret mandala and opened his eyes. Xiaoping'an opened his eyes, and the electronic clock hanging in the training room just pointed to 11:41. The boundary pearl was perfectly integrated with the defection attack. Under the baptism of the 20 points of divine power, Xiaoping'an felt that his physique had improved unknowingly. Xiaoping'an is in a good mood. It was almost lunchtime now. Xiaoping'an got up, opened the door of the room and walked towards the restaurant downstairs. On the way to the restaurant, Xiaoping'an was thinking that if he had more world beads, and with his understanding of the world in the world beads, wouldn't his strength be able to soar like a rocket? How to obtain more world beads has become the key to improving one's strength. It seems that we need to find time to chat with the director and other people to see if there are any other channels to obtain the boundary pearl besides the order committee channel. Xiaoping'an secretly made up his mind. When they arrived at the restaurant, the exaggerated hi-fi equipment in the restaurant was playing pop songs. The only people from the Special Operations Division who came here were Tupolu and Li Yunzhou. Xiaoping'an took some food and came. He arrived and sat down opposite Tupolu. Tupolu glanced at Xiaoping'an. After Xiaoping'an sat down, for some reason, he glanced at Xiaoping'an again. He seemed to feel something, and his brows moved. You, fused with the slave soldier realm pearl. Well, the director gave me a slave soldier realm pearl this morning, and it just fused, Xiaoping'an replied. It's so irritating that people are more powerful than people. Tupolu muttered, when I first came, I worked in the order committee for half a year before the provincial department allocated a slave soldier world bead. You didn't even come here. It'll be there in a month. As he spoke, Tupolu stuffed a chicken leg into his mouth and moved his mouth hard twice. When he pulled his hand back again, he only took the chicken leg in his mouth. A chicken bone came out, and the speed at which he ate the chicken leg made Xiaoping'an stunned. Don't be envious. If you can perfectly integrate the Divine Fire World Pearl and master the Requiem banner, maybe the provincial department will get the Slave Soldier World Pearl for you in just 1 month. Li Yunzhou said with a chuckle from the side. A few minutes later, almost everyone from the Special Operations Division arrived at the restaurant, and Xiaoping'an also met the 3 colleagues who had been on vacation and performing tasks. The uncle who has an elegant temperament and gold-rimmed glasses and always dresses like a gentleman is the oldest summoner in Xianghe City's National Order Committee, named Chen Yishan. The handsome man with sharp eyes and tattoos visible on his neck is named Long Giwen. The domineering red-haired beauty whose whole body is like a ball of fire is called Lu Na. When Li Yunzhou saw Li Na, he was as timid as a quail, like a mouse seeing a cat. He wanted to shrink his head into his neck and lowered his head, not even daring to look at Lu Na. As soon as Lu Na arrived, Li Yunzhou quickly ran away. Young Master Mo Yan also introduced Xiaoping'an to these 3 people. After just one meal, everyone got to know each other. Chen Yishan laughed and said when he would take Xiaoping'an to make extra money. Lu Na looked at Xiaoping'an with sparkling eyes, seeming to be very interested in Xiaoping'an. I didn't expect that in this era, there would be summoners who were virgins. It's so rare. Lu Na stared at Xiaopingan for a moment, and suddenly said this. Xiaopingan spit out the soup he drank in his mouth and choked directly. Arrived and started coughing. The whole restaurant fell silent for an instant. A group of people looked at Xiaopingan with strange eyes. Even Anqing and Fang Lingshan looked at Xiaopingan in a strange way. Damn it! Does this Lu Na have such superpowers? Why haven't I heard of it myself? Looking at Xiaopingan's eyes, Lu Na smiled and shrugged, don't look at me like that. I don't have the ability to awaken. I just deceived you. I didn't expect you to be real.